Nathan's H&K USP-45 barked 3 times in the darkness. 3 muzzle flashes illuminating concrete walls. 3 suppressed weapons clattering to the floor before their owners registered that the warehouse guard wasn't supposed to move like that. Wasn't supposed to shoot like that. Center mass, textbook, 10 seconds from first trigger pull to last body dropping. The fourth contractor was smarter than his colleagues. Weapon hit the ground before Nathan's sight picture found him. Hands went up, professional training overriding panic. Jesus Christ, who the fuck are you? Nathan's fingers stayed indexed along the frame. Muscle memory from Fallujah, from Kandahar, from places that didn't show up on any map the government would acknowledge. His breathing was controlled, heart rate steady. 20 years of force recon training didn't fade just because you traded body armor for a rent-a-cop uniform. Someone who should have stayed retired. Behind him, pressed against the server room door, Victoria Blackwood clutched her 7-year-old daughter against her chest. Sophia's face buried in expensive fabric that smelled like boardrooms and fear. One-eyed teddy bear crushed between them. The girl whose father Nathan had served beside. The girl who was supposed to be safe in her mansion with private security and trust funds. The girl Richard Cordell wanted dead. Nathan's earpiece crackled with Henry's voice distorted but clear. Ghost SWAT's 3 minutes out. You need to exfil now. 3 minutes. Enough time if he was alone, with a CEO and a terrified child in designer pajamas. The math didn't work. Nathan had run similar calculations in a dozen firefights across 2 decades. The answer was always the same: adapt or die. Copy, sub-vocalized response, barely a whisper. Then to the fourth contractor, still on his knees, still smart enough to keep breathing. Hands behind your head. Interlock your fingers. The man complied, eyes tracking Nathan's stance, the economy of movement, the casual competence that came from thousands of hours on the range and hundreds more in actual combat. Professional recognizing professional across the invisible line that separated operators from everyone else. You're military. Nathan didn't answer. Pulled zip ties from his pocket, always carried them now. Old habits refusing to die, and secured the man's wrists with the efficiency of someone who'd done it in the dark under fire with hostile forces closing in. What unit? The contractor's voice carried genuine curiosity. Not fear anymore, just the strange camaraderie that existed between people who'd been to the same dark places. Nathan smiled without humor, the kind of smile that appeared in after-action reports but never in official histories. The kind that doesn't exist in databases. The contractor's face went pale. Force recon. The words didn't need to be spoken. The implication was enough. Special operations, deep cover. The men they sent when regular Marines couldn't handle the mission. Yeah, I'm done here. Nathan zip-tied him anyway. Trust but verify. Ronald Reagan had said that about the Soviets. Nathan applied it to everyone who just tried to kill people under his protection. Victoria stepped forward. Her voice shook but held together through sheer force of will. CEO voice trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly turned violent. Nathan, where did you learn? Later. Nathan moved to the window. Tactical assessment, automatic as breathing. 3 black SUVs parked at angles that provided overlapping fields of fire. Professional setup. 6 more hostiles, minimum based on standard team composition. Body armor visible through the windows. Automatic weapons. Thermal scopes mounted on the lead vehicle. This wasn't corporate security moonlighting for extra cash. This was a professional hit team with military hardware and zero conscience. For a 7-year-old girl and a defense contract worth more than most small countries' GDP. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered on speaker because Victoria deserved to hear what was coming. Hello, Nathan. Richard Cordell's voice. Smooth, educated. The kind of voice that convinced boards and politicians, and probably himself, that he was doing necessary things for the greater good. Impressive display, but you're trapped, surrounded, outgunned. Give me Victoria and the girl and I'll let you and your son live. You have my word. Nathan's jaw tightened. The mention of Lucas was deliberate, calculated, a threat wrapped in false magnanimity. You mentioned Lucas. Mistake. Not a threat, a statement of fact. He's at Riverside Elementary right now. Yes. Room 14, Mrs. Patterson's class. Blue inhaler in his backpack, the expensive kind, because insurance doesn't cover the cheap generics. Sophia whimpered. Victoria's face drained of color until she looked like one of those marble statues in museums. Beautiful and cold and lifeless. Nathan's voice dropped to Arctic temperatures. The tone his Marines had learned meant violence was coming, and mercy wasn't part of the equation. Here's my counteroffer. You have 3 minutes to leave Portland. Every second after that, I'm hunting you. And when I find you, and I will find you, I'm going to do what I did to the Kandahar cell that took my partner. Ask your CIA friends about Operation Righteous Fury. Then ask yourself if you really want me thinking about you the way I thought about them. Silence on the line. Too long. Nathan could almost hear the mental calculations, weighing threat assessment against operational reality, wondering if the warehouse guard was bluffing or if force recon operators actually did the things whispered about in classified briefings. You're bluffing. Try me. The line went dead. Nathan pocketed the phone, checked his magazine. 15 rounds left, 2 spare magazines in his pockets. 45 rounds total against a minimum of 6 hostiles with automatic weapons and body armor. The math was bad, but Nathan had survived worse odds in places where backup was measured in days, not minutes. Victoria stared at him like he'd transformed into someone else entirely, which was accurate. The man who'd helped her pick up scattered papers that morning was gone. What stood in his place was the weapon the Marine Corps had spent 2 decades sharpening. Who are you? Nathan didn't have an answer that would make sense to someone who'd never worn the uniform. Never stacked on a door at 3 in the morning, knowing that behind it were people who wanted you dead and had the skills to make it happen. 4 years ago, he was Nathan Ghost Reeves, Force Recon Sniper. The Marine they called when missions went sideways, and the unofficial solution manual started with Send Ghost and ended with Problem Solved. Today, he was just a single father trying to keep his asthmatic son fed and medicated on $18 an hour. But some skills didn't fade. Some training stayed in your bones long after you turned in your rifle and learned to sleep through the night again. Most nights, anyway. Someone who used to be very good at keeping people safe. The server room door exploded inward. Breaching charge expertly placed. Nathan grabbed Victoria and Sophia pulled them behind a filing cabinet as smoke and debris filled the air. His body became a shield without conscious thought. Protect the principal. First rule of close protection. 2 contractors rushed through the smoke. Nathan put them both down with controlled pairs. 4 rounds, 2 targets, textbook. But the smoke was clearing and his position was compromised and he could hear boots on the stairs. Multiple sets. Coordinated assault. Time to move. He pulled Victoria and Sophia toward the emergency exit, the one the fire marshal had signed off on, but nobody had used in 3 years. The one Nathan had checked his first week on the job because Marines always knew where the exits were. They burst into the stairwell. Nathan went first weapon up, clearing corners with the muscle memory of 1,000 training runs. Victoria followed Sophia in her arms, moving faster than anyone in 3-inch heels had a right to. The parking garage. Nathan's truck was parked in the employee section. Beaten Ford F-150 with 200,000 miles and a prayer. Not tactical, not armored, but it ran, and that's what mattered. Get in, back seat, stay down. Victoria didn't argue, smart woman. She climbed in, pulled Sophia down below window level. Nathan fired up the engine. No time for tactical driving checks. Just raw speed and the desperate hope that Cordell's contractors weren't good enough shots to hit a moving vehicle at night. They weren't. Muzzle flashes lit up the parking garage like a strobe light. Bullets sparked off concrete. Nathan's rear window spiderwebbed but held. He hit the street doing 40 and didn't slow down. His phone rang. Henry again. Ghost status. Exfilling with principals, 2 civilians, 1 child, heading to Rally Point Bravo. Copy, I'll have the safe house ready. Nathan ended the call, checked his mirrors. No pursuit yet, but they'd be coming. Cordell had resources, money, connections, the kind of power that bought cooperation from people who should know better. Victoria's voice from the back seat, steady despite everything. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, somewhere I trust. And where's that? Nathan thought about Henry Chen's compound, 20 miles outside Portland. former Marine sergeant who'd served with Nathan in Fallujah, the man who'd taken a bullet for him and never asked for payback, the kind of friend who measured loyalty in blood and found it sufficient. With family, the word hung in the air, strange and true. Nathan's actual family was limited to Lucas, but the Marine Corps had given him another kind of family, the kind that didn't need DNA to make you willing to die for them. 36 hours earlier, Nathan's biggest concern was whether he could afford Lucas's inhaler refill before the current one ran out. Now he was running tactical extraction with a CEO and her daughter, while a corporate executive with murder on his resume tried to kill them all. Some weeks just turned out that way. Nathan Reeves walked the perimeter of Blackwood Technologies at 6 in the morning, eyes moving in patterns ingrained by 2 decades of hostile territory patrol. But instead of an M4 carbine, he carried a maglite that barely worked. Instead of ceramic plate carrier, a polyester uniform 2 sizes too large and stained with someone else's coffee. Instead of Marines watching his six, he had a walkie-talkie with dying batteries and a supervisor who thought tactical awareness meant knowing where the bathroom was. 4 years since retirement. 4 years since Emma's funeral, where they'd played taps and folded a flag and said things about service and sacrifice that sounded noble but felt empty. 4 years of night shifts and ramen dinners and counting pennies to keep Lucas's prescription current. $18 an hour. No benefits, no respect, no future except more of the same until his body gave out and they replaced him with someone younger and more desperate. He was 43 years old with 3 Purple Hearts in a shoebox, 2 Silver Stars he couldn't talk about, and a classified service record that ended with honorably retired and meant psychologically broken by things we can't acknowledge. Invisible to everyone who passed him in the parking lot. Just another working poor. Just another man the system chewed up and forgot about. But his eyes never stopped scanning. Old habits, old reflexes. Exits, 4 main, 2 emergency, 1 loading dock that violated fire code but nobody cared. Blind spots, northeast corner, west fence line, where trees created visual obstruction. Security cameras, 12 visible, 3 non-functional based on angle drift and lack of maintenance. Fence integrity compromise on east side where erosion had undermined support posts. Lighting inadequate in loading zone creating approach vectors an assault team could exploit. Nathan's tactical brain cataloged everything without conscious effort. Force of habit. Waste of time. Nobody was going to assault a defense contractor in downtown Portland. This wasn't Kandahar. This wasn't a firebase under siege. His phone buzzed. Lucas's school, the number he'd memorized and learned to dread. Mr. Reeves, this is Nurse Collins. Lucas had an asthma episode during PE. He's stable now, but we used his emergency inhaler. You'll need to bring a replacement. Nathan checked his watch. Shift ended in 2 hours. Spare inhaler cost $280 without insurance. His checking account held $53 in the fading hope that somehow the math would work out differently this time. I'll be there as soon as I can. Professional voice, calm, not letting the panic show, not letting this stranger hear how close they were to the edge. 1 medical emergency from homelessness. 1 missed shift from eviction. 1 stroke of bad luck from the kind of poverty that ground people down until there was nothing left but desperation and bad choices. Emma's voice echoed in his memory. Hospital bed. 3 days before cancer took her. Before the medical bills bankrupted them and forced Nathan into early retirement because someone had to take care of Lucas and the Marine Corps didn't accommodate single fathers with special needs children. Promise me you'll take care of him. No matter what. Promise me, Nate. His throat had been too tight for words, just a nod, a kiss on her forehead, a final embrace that smelled like antiseptic and death. Always, on my life. A black Mercedes pulled into the executive lot. Victoria Blackwood, CEO. Nathan had seen her maybe 3 times in 2 years, always in expensive suits that cost more than his monthly rent, always on her phone, voice sharp with authority, always in motion and always busy, always important. Never looked at the security guard. Today she stumbled, getting out, papers scattered in the wind. Nathan moved instinctively, training overriding thought. Helped gather documents before they blew into the street. Habit from briefings in Kabul. Classified materials never touched the ground. Never left your sight. Never got compromised. Thank you. Distracted, dismissive, not making eye contact. Nathan handed them back. Military contracts, defense specifications, clearance stamps he hadn't seen since his last deployment. Technical diagrams that meant nothing to him but probably meant everything to people who understood aerospace engineering. Ma'am. Single word. Professional courtesy. Marine discipline. She was already walking away, heels clicking on pavement. Nathan turned back to his patrol. Job done. Interaction over. Back to being invisible. But something had caught his eye. A photograph paper-clipped to one of the files. Marine officer in dress blues. Strong jaw, confident smile, captain's bars catching the light. The kind of photo they use for promotion boards and memorial services. Colonel James Blackwood. Nathan's hand froze. He knew that face, not personally, never served in the same unit, but reputations traveled in the Corps. Blackwood had commanded a unit operating adjacent to Nathan's sector in 2019. Good officer by all accounts. Respected by his Marines. Killed 3 years ago in what the official report called a training accident. Nathan had read enough after-action reports to know what training accident meant when it showed up in a colonel's obituary. It meant someone didn't want to talk about what really happened. It meant questions that wouldn't be answered and investigations that went nowhere. He looked at the other papers still in his hands. Project Wraith Eyes Only, prototype delivery, October 15th, estimated value $400. Technical specifications he couldn't parse but recognized as classified beyond his old pay grade. Nathan's tactical mind, dormant for 4 years under the weight of poverty and exhaustion, sparked to life like an engine turning over after a long winter. High-value prototype, wealthy widow without protection, public delivery date, substantial monetary value, classified technology. If he were planning a hostile acquisition, corporate euphemism for theft and murder, this was the perfect setup. Vulnerable target, known schedule, motivated buyers in half a dozen countries that didn't respect intellectual property laws. Nathan shook his head. Not his problem, not his circus, not his war anymore. He was a security guard making poverty wages and trying to keep his son alive. Let the FBI handle corporate espionage. Let actual security professionals worry about billion-dollar defense contracts. He went back to his patrol, but his eyes kept scanning. Old habits didn't die. They just waited for someone to need them again. Nathan was 19 minutes from end of shift when he heard the scream. High-pitched. Female. Error with an edge of fury. The sound prey makes when cornered. His body reacted before his brain finished processing. Coffee cup dropped. Sprint toward the sound legs, pumping breath controlled. Hand reaching for a sidearm that hadn't been there in 4 years. Tactical brain already running scenarios. Kidnapping, assault, robbery, domestic violence, active shooter. Threat assessment based on auditory input and terrain analysis. The parking lot. 2 black SUVs, engines running position for rapid departure. Professional setup. 4 men in business suits that didn't quite fit right, fabric pulling at the shoulders where body armor created bulk pants, legs riding high over tactical boots instead of dress shoes. Concealed carry bulges at the hip. Earpieces barely visible. Not corporate security, not police. Private military contractors trying and failing to look civilian. Victoria Blackwood backing away from them. Sophia clinging to her mother's legs, 7 years old and wise enough to be terrified. One-eyed teddy bear pressed against her chest like a talisman. The lead contractor's body language was all wrong. Too relaxed, too confident. The posture of someone used to compliance. Someone who'd never been told no by people who mattered. Mrs. Blackwood, Mr. Cordell just wants to talk. 5 minutes of your time. Very reasonable request. Victoria's voice shook but held firm. CEO voice. Boardroom voice. The kind of authority that moved markets and made men twice her age defer to her judgment. I said no, I don't meet with people who send armed thugs to intimidate me. Leave. Now. The second contractor stepped forward. Smiled. The kind of smile predators used right before they struck. Ma'am, we're not asking anymore. Mr. Cordell's patience has limits. You can come willingly or we can arrange transportation. Your choice. Nathan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Problem here. 3 heads turned. The contractors assessed him in a fraction of a second. Rent-a-cop, middle-aged, unarmed, overweight, uniform, minimum wage, and minimal threat. Dismissed him before their eyes finished tracking his movement. Mistake. Private conversation, the first contractor said. Tone that worked on civilian police and mall security. Move along. Nathan's eyes tracked details invisible to anyone who hadn't spent 20 years hunting men in hostile territory. Glock 19's recent manufacture based on slide serrations. Professional stance with weight forward, ready to draw. Earpieces with throat mics, radio network, which meant at least one more person they couldn't see. Escape route already planned, driver visible in the lead SUV, engine temperature suggesting it had been running for 5 minutes minimum. No backup visible, but probably staged within 2 blocks. Professional operation, military discipline. Expensive training for a conversation with a CEO who didn't want to have it. Mrs. Blackwood, Nathan addressed her directly, ignoring the contractors. Old tactic. Acknowledge the principle, not the threat. Let the opposition know you saw through their intimidation. You okay? Victoria's eyes met his. Recognition dawned the security guard who'd helped with papers. Relief flickered across her face before professional control reasserted itself. These men won't leave. We have a meeting scheduled with Mr. Cordell. The first contractor interrupted. Stepped between Nathan and Victoria, hand drifting toward his weapon. Subtle. Practiced. The kind of movement that preceded violence in 36 countries Nathan had operated in. This doesn't concern you. Nathan's stance shifted, weight on the balls of his feet, hands open at his sides, relaxed but ready, center line protected, angles calculated, exit vectors mapped. The contractor noticed. Something flickered in his eyes, reassessment, the beginning of doubt. Mrs. Blackwood doesn't want to go, so you gentlemen need to leave. Now. The first contractor smiled, pulled out his phone, showed Nathan a badge. Private security, licensed, legal. We're executing a lawful protective service contract. You, on the other hand, are interfering with our duties. That's a crime. Fake badge. Good fake, but fake. Nathan recognized the Tell's wrong agency seal, serial number. Format didn't match current standards, lamination slightly off. But convincing enough for police who didn't know better. Tell Richard Cordell that Victoria declined his meeting. The contractor froze. How do you know Mr. Cordell's name? Nathan gestured at the paper Victoria clutched. Letterhead, says Sentinel Corporation, Richard Cordell, VP. Basic observation. Lie, smooth, delivered with the casual confidence of someone telling the truth. Nathan had learned the skill in interrogations where lives depended on making hostile forces believe whatever story kept your team alive. The contractors exchanged glances, silent communication. The first one spoke into his radio, hand cupped over the mic. Pause. Then his expression changed. Hardened. Decision made. New orders. Drew his weapon. Fast. Professional draw from concealment, two-handed grip, sight alignment, finger on the trigger. The kind of speed that came from thousands of hours on the range and real-world experience. Not fast enough. Nathan's combat reflexes, dormant 4 years sleeping under the weight of civilian life, exploded back into existence like muscle memory, never truly forgotten. Sidestep offline from the muzzle line. Wrist control with his left hand trapping the weapon. Elbow strike to the solar plexus with his right, driving through the target. Weapon strip as the man doubled over, gasping for air his diaphragm wouldn't provide. Leg sweep. Ground contact. Unconscious before his head stopped bouncing. 2.3 seconds from draw to neutralize threat. Second contractor went for his weapon. Nathan already had the first man's Glock sight picture, acquired finger on the frame outside the trigger guard. Don't. The man froze. Hands came up visible and empty, professional instinct overriding ego. He recognized what he was facing now. Recognized the economy of movement, the casual precision, the complete lack of hesitation. Operator, real operator, not a security guard playing soldier. On the ground, now. The man complied. Nathan kept the weapon trained on him while he zip-tied his hands behind his back. Driver in the second SUV peeled out tires screaming. Smart man, knew when to cut losses. 15 seconds total. 2 armed contractors neutralized. Zero casualties except pride. Nathan cleared the weapon magazine out round ejected from chamber visual and physical confirmation of the safe. Handed it to Victoria. Hold this. Point it at the ground. Don't touch the trigger. She took it with shaking hands, looked at him like he'd transformed into someone else entirely. Which was accurate. The invisible security guard was gone. What stood in his place was the weapon the Marine Corps had spent 20 years perfecting. Mr. Reeves, how did you? Ma'am, I think you should call the police. Real police, not these contractors. Victoria's phone rang. Unknown number. Her hands were shaking too badly to hold it properly. She put it on speaker. Victoria, male voice. Cultured, educated. The kind of voice that belonged to men who thought money solved all problems and violence was something you hired other people to handle. That was unfortunate. My associates were simply delivering an invitation, a conversation, nothing more. Who is this Richard Cordell? I believe you know the name. Pause for effect. Let the name carry its weight. And I believe you know what I want. Project Wraith. The board vote is Friday. You will sell Blackwood Technologies to Sentinel at our offered price, $50 million. Very generous for a company drowning in debt. Victoria's voice hardened, CEO voice returning anger burning through fear. The company is worth $400 million with the government contract. Your offer is insulting. My offer is reality. Accept it or I'll take what I need, one way or another. Cordell's tone shifted, casual, conversational, the kind of tone people used when discussing weather or sports scores. And anyone who stands in my way will learn what happened to your husband, James. Training accidents are so tragic, so preventable, so convenient. The line went dead. Victoria's face drained of color. Sophia started crying, quiet sobs muffled against her mother's hip. Nathan felt something cold and familiar settle into his chest. The feeling he got before missions went kinetic. Before the shooting started and men died, and after action reports got written in passive voice to obscure who pulled which trigger. He just admitted, Victoria's voice cracked. James didn't die in an accident. He was murdered. Cordell murdered my husband. Nathan looked at the two contractors on the ground, at Sophia crying, at the careful setup of SUVs and weapons and threats delivered with corporate politeness. Colonel James Blackwood. Good officer. Good man. Father to a 7-year-old girl who just lost him to violence disguised as accident. Nathan thought about Lucas waiting at school for an inhaler that cost more than Nathan could afford. About Emma's last words. About the promise he'd made to protect his son no matter what. About extending that promise to another father's daughter because that's what Marines did. They protected. They served. They kept their word even when it cost them everything. He knelt down, bringing himself to Sophia's eye level. Gentle voice. Completely different person from the one who just put 2 armed men on the ground. Hey, Sophia, you know what Marines do? The girl shook her head, clutching Captain the teddy bear tighter. We protect people who need protecting, and I'm going to make sure you and your mom stay safe, okay? Promise. Nathan thought about the $53 in his checking account, about the warehouse security job that barely kept them fed, about the quiet life he'd built because Emma had asked him to come home from the war and be a father instead of a weapon. Some promises you made knowing they'd cost you everything. Some promises you made anyway. Promise. He stood, met Victoria's eyes. She saw something there that made her take a step back. Not fear, recognition. Understanding that the man in front of her wasn't the one she'd dismissed in the parking lot that morning. Mrs. Blackwood, I think we need to talk. Somewhere not here, somewhere safe. Victoria looked at her daughter, at the contractors on the ground, at the empty space where her husband should have been to protect them. Decision crystallized in her eyes. Yes, let's talk. They sat in a corner booth at a diner 8 blocks away. The kind of place that served breakfast all day and asked no questions. Sophia colored with crayons. The waitress brought earbuds in, watching a show on Victoria's phone, oblivious to the conversation that would determine whether she lived or died. Victoria's hands shook around her coffee cup, CEO composure cracking under the weight of attempted kidnapping and casual admission of murder. Well, start talking. Who are you really? Nathan considered operational security, need-to-know basis, classification protocols, all the rules that had governed his life for 20 years. But this woman needed to know. Her daughter's life depended on her understanding exactly who was trying to kill them and who might be able to stop it. Nathan Reeves, retired Marine, Force Recon, 20 years active duty. Victoria blinked. Force Recon, that's special operations, right? Specialized reconnaissance and direct action. We went places regular Marines couldn't go, did things regular Marines couldn't do. Matter of fact, no pride, no false modesty, just stating reality. Fallujah, Kandahar, other places without names or coordinates you could find on any map. And now you're a warehouse security guard making minimum wage. $18 an hour, not minimum wage, just close enough that the difference doesn't matter. Nathan wrapped his hands around his own coffee cup. Warmth without comfort. My wife Emma died 4 years ago. Cancer. Medical bills bankrupted us, even with military insurance. I took early retirement to care for our son Lucas. He's 8. Severe asthma. Requires expensive medication that insurance doesn't cover adequately. The security job was the only position I could get that offered night shifts and weekends off for his doctor appointments. Compassion flickered across Victoria's face, the kind that came from understanding loss. I'm sorry, Nathan shrugged. Some losses you carried, some you learned to live with, some stayed raw no matter how much time passed. Life happens, but those men today that was professional, private military contractors with good training and expensive equipment. Richard Cordell isn't playing corporate games. He's running a military operation against civilian targets. Against me because of Project Wraith. Victoria hesitated. Legal obligations, non-disclosure agreements, classification requirements, all meaningless when someone wanted you dead. Its next-generation stealth technology makes aircraft and vehicles invisible to radar, thermal imaging, even visual detection under certain conditions. My husband James developed it over 10 years. The technology is worth $400 million, maybe more depending on applications. The military wants exclusive rights. So does every hostile foreign power with money and espionage capabilities. Nathan processed, and Cordell wants to steal it. Worse, he wants me to sell the company to Sentinel Corporation at a fraction of its value. Board vote is Friday, 3 days from now. If I sell, Cordell gets Wraith legally, controls the patents, the research, everything. If I don't, she swallowed hard. His men have been escalating, anonymous threats. My car was tampered with last month. Someone broke into my house 2 weeks ago. Nothing stolen, just moved. Messages left. Pictures of Sophia at school. And now this. What did the police say? Insufficient evidence. No proof Cordell's involved. No witnesses. No recordings. Victoria's voice cracked. Frustration bleeding through professional control. They think I'm paranoid. A woman who can't handle running a defense company, who's seeing threats that don't exist because I'm emotionally unstable after my husband's death. Nathan's hands tightened around his coffee cup. He knew that story, knew how systems failed people who needed help, knew how authority dismissed victims until it was too late to save them. Your husband's death. Tell me about the training accident. Victoria pulled out her phone, showed him photos. Twisted wreckage. Helicopter that had been state-of-the-art now scattered across a test range. Official reports stamped with approvals from 3 different agencies. Helicopter crashed during a test flight. FAA ruled pilot error. James was flying. They said he made a mistake, lost control, died on impact. She played a voice recording. James Blackwood's voice strong and clear. The voice of a man who didn't make mistakes in the air. Tori, if something happens to me, don't trust anyone at Sentinel. Cordell knows about Wraith. He's static. Impact sounds, recording cut. Nathan's jaw clenched. Murder. Premeditated. Covered up with official reports and bureaucratic rubber stamps. He knew he was in danger. He knew, and he died anyway. And I didn't believe him. Tears now held back by will alone. I thought he was being paranoid, seeing conspiracies. I told him to focus on the work, ignore the politics. I told him everything would be fine. Nathan thought about Emma telling him to come home, to leave the war behind, to be a father instead of a weapon, about promises made and kept and the price paid for both. You need protection, real protection, not rent-a-cops, not police who don't believe you, private military contractors who answer to you, not someone on Cordell's payroll. I can't afford that. Blackwood Technologies is worth millions on paper, but liquid assets. James left everything tied up in research and development. The government contract doesn't pay out until we deliver the prototype. I'm barely keeping the company solvent until Friday. I have maybe $50,000 in available cash. Good contractors cost $10,000 a day minimum. I can't protect us for 3 days on what I have. Nathan thought about Lucas needing his inhaler, about the $53 in his checking account, about the dead officer who'd served honorably and left a daughter and widow unprotected. I'll do it. Victoria stared. What? Protect you and Sophia until the board vote. 3 days. Keep you alive long enough to win and expose what Cordell did to your husband. Nathan, I can't afford. You're already paying me $18 an hour as security. Call this expanded duties. He met her eyes. Ma'am, I served with men like your husband. Good men, good officers. If Cordell murdered him and is coming after you and Sophia, I can't walk away. Won't walk away. Some debts transcend money. You're one man. Cordell has resources, money, connections, professional contractors. I'm not one man. Nathan's voice dropped. Cold, quiet. The voice that had preceded violence in 36 countries. I'm a force recon Marine with 20 years of experience in hostile territory. Cordell has money and contractors. I have skills he can't buy and instincts he can't match. He thinks I'm a security guard. He thinks I'm nobody. He's wrong. Victoria studied him. Something shifted in her expression. Decision crystallizing. Wait, James mentioned a sniper attached to his unit in Afghanistan. Call sign Ghost. Was that? Nathan pulled out his wallet. Old military ID expired but still carried. Call sign printed on the back where most people put emergency contact information. Yes, ma'am. I provided overwatch for your husband's patrols. 6 months in 2019. He talked about you, never by name. Just Ghost. Victoria's voice softened. He said you saved his sergeant during an ambush. Pulled him out under fire while hostile forces tried to overrun their position. He got the details wrong. Your husband was the one who pulled my spotter out. I just provided covering fire. Nathan's throat tightened. Good man, good officer. Talked about you and Sophia every night. Showed us pictures. Said when his tour ended, he was going home to teach Sophia to ride a bike. Said he'd missed too much of her life already. He did. Taught her 2 months before he died. Tears now flowing freely. Victoria didn't wipe them away, just let them fall while she held her daughter's future in her hands. Okay, 3 days. Keep us alive. Win the vote. Expose Cordell. What do you need? Nathan's tactical mind shifted gears. Defense to offense. Reactive to proactive. First, we secure Lucas. Cordell threatened him. That means he knows where to find him. Second, we get you and Sophia somewhere safe. Somewhere Cordell can't reach. Third, his phone rang. Lucas's school. Their Principal Hayes. Nathan's stomach dropped. Mr. Reeves, this is Principal Hayes. I'm calling because a man came by asking to pick up Lucas. Said he was a friend from your military service. We asked for identification and he left quickly. But Mr. Reeves, he knew details. Lucas's classroom number, his teacher's name, his medical condition, everything. Nathan's blood turned to ice. Old instinct, old fear, the kind that came from losing people you were supposed to protect. Is Lucas safe right now? He's in my office with me. I didn't let him out of my sight after the man left. Lock your door. Don't let anyone in except uniformed police. I'm 15 minutes out. He hung up, met Victoria's terrified gaze. They know about Lucas. Cordell's making his move. Word count 483 words. Part 2. The hunter arrives, 5,000 words. Theo Dung David Sarah outline. The dark Silverado didn't return that night, or the next. But David couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He installed motion sensor lights on the building's exterior. changed the locks, bought a baseball bat he kept by the door, not much, but something. Sarah noticed. You're worried. Just being careful. David didn't mention the truck, didn't want to scare her more than she already was. But he started walking Ryan to the corner store when Sarah needed groceries. Started checking the street before letting them leave the building. Small precautions that felt inadequate against the threat he sensed circling. On the sixth day, Sarah got her first paycheck, $240 for 3 days of work. She cashed it immediately, came back to the shop with groceries and $50 in her hand. Rent, she said, offering the bills. I know it's not much, but David shook his head. Keep it, save it. You'll need money when you find your own place. David, I can't keep taking on this. You're not taking, you're surviving. There's a difference, whereas he returned to the Harley he was rebuilding, uncomfortable with gratitude he didn't feel he'd earned. Besides, Ryan helped me organize the tool room yesterday. Kid's got a good eye for systems. That's worth something. Sarah smiled slightly, first real smile he'd seen from her. He likes you, talks about you constantly. Mr. David showed me how spark plugs work. Mr. David says motorcycles are like metal horses. You're becoming his hero. David's chest tightened. He thought about Ethan, about being someone's hero once and failing catastrophically at the moment it mattered most. I'm nobody's hero, just a guy with a shop and some extra space. You're more than that. Sarah's voice was quiet. You see people, really see them. That's rarer than you think. Before David could respond, the shop phone rang. He answered, expecting a customer. Chen's Motors. Silence on the line, then breathing, heavy, deliberate. I know she's there. Male voice, deep, controlled anger underneath forced calm. David's instincts screamed danger. You've got the wrong number. Sarah Patterson, my wife, and my son Ryan. I know they're with you. The voice hardened. You think I'm stupid? Think I can't track them? I've got friends, Chen. Friends in useful places. Took me a week, but I found her. David's hand tightened on the phone. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, and here's what's going to happen. You're going to send them out. Sarah's going to get in her car, and she's going to come home where she belongs. Do that, and I've got no problem with you. You're just some chump mechanic who didn't know better. And if I don't, the voice dropped to something cold and final, then I come in there and take what's mine, and you get hurt trying to be a hero. Your choice, bud. The line went dead. David stood frozen, phone in hand. Sarah was watching him, face draining of color. She knew. Somehow she knew. That was Jake, wasn't it? David nodded slowly. He knows you're here, says he's coming. Sarah's legs gave out. She sat hard on the shop floor, hands covering her face. No. I was so careful. I didn't use credit cards, didn't call anyone, didn't. She looked up at David. You have to make us leave, right now. If he comes here and you're involved, he'll hurt you. Jake doesn't make empty threats. I'm not making you leave. David, you don't understand. Jake was military police in the Army. He knows people, cops, judges, parole officers. He's got connections I can't fight. Sarah was shaking now. And when he's angry, when he drinks, he doesn't stop. Last time he put me in the hospital with 3 broken ribs and a concussion. That was before I left. Now that I've embarrassed him by running, he'll kill me, and anyone who tries to stop him. David thought about the baseball bat by the door, about his own capabilities strong from years of physical labor, scrappy from growing up in rough neighborhoods, but no formal combat training. Just a mechanic who'd been in a few bar fights decades ago. Against a man with military training and connections and nothing to lose, the math was bad, but the alternative was worse. Then we call the police. Get a restraining order. Make this official. Sarah laughed bitterly. I tried that, twice. First time, Jake's buddy in the precinct lost the paperwork. Second time, the judge said I didn't have sufficient evidence of imminent danger. Jake's smart. He never hits where people can see. Never leaves marks that last. She pulled up her sleeve, showed old scars. Cigarette burns. He does this. Things that look like accidents. Things that are hard to prove. David stared at the scars, rage building in his chest. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was real human suffering, inflicted by someone who enjoyed power over the vulnerable. How long before he comes? I don't know. Could be today, could be tomorrow, but he will come. Sarah stood on shaking legs. We need to pack, need to run again. No, I know. David, no more running. You've been running for 3 weeks and he still found you. Running doesn't work. David's mind was already working through options. We stay, we prepare, and when he comes, we're ready. Ready how? You're a mechanic, not a bodyguard. And Sarah's voice cracked. I'm nobody, just a woman who made bad choices and can't protect her own son. Ryan appeared in the doorway to the back room, having heard everything. Mom, don't say that. You protect me every day. Sarah pulled him close, tears flowing freely now. Baby, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you have to see this. It's okay, Mom. Ryan's voice was small but steady, the voice of a child who'd learned to be brave too young. Mr. David will help, right, Mr. David? David looked at the 6-year-old boy and at the terrified woman, at the small family that had accidentally become his responsibility. He thought about Ethan, about promises made to ghosts, about the second plate of food he had ordered every Friday for 3 years because he couldn't accept loss. Maybe this was his chance to stop losing. Right, I'll help. David pulled out his phone. I'm calling someone who might be able to do what the police won't. Who? A neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. She gave me a card for a domestic violence resource center. They have legal advocates, emergency housing people who know how to handle situations like this. David dialed the number Mrs. Henderson had written on the back. And I'm calling her too because I think she can help in ways we don't understand yet. Mrs. Eleanor Henderson arrived 30 minutes later with a woman in her 40s who introduced herself as Patricia Nguyen, legal advocate with the Portland Domestic Violence Resource Center. Patricia had the efficient competence of someone who'd seen every variation of this situation. She sat Sarah down, took detailed notes, photographed old injuries, documented everything Sarah could remember about Jake's violence. You have enough for an emergency restraining order, Patricia said. Not just a standard one, an emergency order that goes into effect immediately. I'll file it this afternoon. Once it's served, Jake can't come within 500 feet of you, Ryan, or this address. He won't care about a piece of paper, Sarah said. Maybe not, but it gives us legal standing. If he violates it, he goes to jail. No bail, mandatory hold. Patricia's expression was grim, and it creates a paper trail. Every violation is documented. Every contact is evidence. That's how we build the case that keeps you safe permanently. Mrs. Henderson spoke up from the corner where she'd been listening. Sarah, I need to ask you something. Your maiden name, it was Patterson, correct? Sarah looked surprised. Yes, how did you know? Because 34 years ago, I was the nurse who helped deliver you at Portland General Hospital. Mrs. Henderson's voice was gentle. Your mother was Mary Patterson, 19 years old. No family support. I stayed with her through a difficult labor. I remembered her because, she paused, because she reminded me of my own daughter who I'd lost contact with around that same time. Sarah stared. You were there when I was born. I was, and 6 years later you came back to the same hospital. You were pregnant, young, scared. I recognized you because you had your mother's eyes. Mrs. Henderson's voice grew quieter. You gave birth to a baby girl, Emma. She was born premature, 28 weeks. And she only lived 3 days. The room went silent. Sarah's face went white as bone. How did you? I never told anyone. Jake doesn't even know. I was working NICU that week. I held Emma during her final hours because you were too emotionally devastated and there was no family to support you. Mrs. Henderson's eyes were wet. I've thought about you for years. Wondered what happened to you. And when I saw you here with David, saw Ryan, I started to suspect. So I checked old hospital records. Confirmed it. Sarah was crying now. Emma would be 34 years old. She'd be... Her voice broke. I never even got to hold her properly. They took her away so fast, and then she was in an incubator, and then she was gone. Mrs. Henderson crossed the room, sat beside Sarah, took her hand. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for your loss. And I'm sorry that Jake used that loss to hurt you. He blamed me, said it was my fault for being stressed. for working too much, for not being a good enough mother before Emma was even born. Sarah's voice was hollow, and I believed him. Thought maybe he was right. Maybe I killed my own daughter. No, Mrs. Henderson's voice was firm. Premature birth is not your fault. Medical complications are not your fault. Emma's death was a tragedy, but it was not your failing. Do you understand me? Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Patricia made more notes. This gives us additional context. Psychological abuse following traumatic loss. Using grief as a weapon. The judge will want to hear this. She looked at David. You've been providing them shelter. Yes. For how long? 6 days. Are you in a relationship with Sarah? No, just helping someone who needed help. Patricia studied him. The court will ask if you have any criminal record, any history of violence, any reason you shouldn't be considered a safe person for Ryan to be around. I don't. Clean record. Business owner. References if you need them. Good. Because if Jake shows up and there's an altercation, we need you to be unambiguously the good guy here. Patricia packed her files. I'm filing the emergency restraining order now. It'll be served to Jake's last known address within 24 hours. Until then, you need to be extremely careful. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't open the door for anyone you don't know. And if Jake shows up, call 911 immediately, David finished. I understand. But understanding and reality were different things. Because that night at 11 p.m., when David was upstairs trying to sleep, he heard the sound of breaking glass downstairs in the shop. David grabbed the baseball bat and his phone dialed 911 as he moved toward the stairs. The operator answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? Break-in at Chen's Motors, 847 East, Burnside. Possible domestic violence situation. Suspect is, a voice from below slurred with alcohol and rage. Sarah, I know you're in here. You think you can take my son and hide from me? David's blood ran cold. Jake, actually here, actually inside. Suspect is on premises now, David said quietly into the phone. Male approximately 6 feet military training. I have civilians to protect. Officers are en route. Stay on the line. Do not engage. But David couldn't not engage because Sarah and Ryan were in the back room and Jake was between him and them. He moved down the stairs quietly, saw Jake in the shop floor weaving slightly drunk but not incapacitated. Big man, 6'2", broad shoulders, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, holding something in his right hand, not a gun. A tire iron from the shop. I can smell you, Sarah, Jake shouted. I can always find you. You're mine. You and Ryan are mine. David stepped into view. Jake Miller. Jake spun, eyes wild. Who the fuck are you? David Chen, I own this shop. And you're trespassing. Jake laughed, ugly sound. Trespassing? You're hiding my wife and kid. That's kidnapping. That's a felony, friend. Sarah's not your wife anymore. She left, and Ryan's safer away from you. You don't know shit about my family. Jake took a step forward, tire iron swinging loosely. She tell you about Emma, about how she killed our daughter with her stress and her complaining and her... She told me enough, told me you beat her, told me you blame her for things that weren't her fault. David kept his voice calm despite his racing heart. Police are coming. You need to leave. Now. Or what you'll make me, Jake assessed David with military precision. You're what 40-45 mechanic. No training, soft. He smiled. I'll go through you like wet paper. David didn't doubt it. Jake had 70 pounds on him, military combat training, and rage-fueled adrenaline. David had a baseball bat in desperation. In any fair fight, David would lose. So David didn't fight fair. He grabbed a pneumatic wrench from the workbench, heavy industrial tool, and threw it at Jake's head. Not to hit him, to distract. Jake ducked instinctively, and in that half-second, David lunged forward with the bat, not swinging for Jake's head, but for his knee. The one injury that would actually stop someone big and trained. The bat connected. Jake screamed, leg buckling. But he didn't go down. He swung the tire iron in a wide arc that caught David's shoulder. Pain exploded through his arm. The bat fell from numb fingers. Jake grabbed David by the throat, slammed him against the workbench. You protecting her. You fucking her. Is that what this is? David couldn't breathe, couldn't answer. His vision started to blur. He grabbed for anything, found a spray can of brake cleaner on the bench, sprayed it in Jake's face. Jake roared, released him, staggered back, clawing at his eyes. David sucked in air, grabbed the bat with his offhand right arm useless, and swung for Jake's already injured knee. This time Jake went down. Hard. Screaming obscenities. The shop lights blazed on. Sarah stood at the light switch, Ryan behind her. She'd armed herself with a torque wrench, face set with determination. "Get away from him, Jake." Jake looked up through watering eyes. "Baby, Sarah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean, I just missed you so much." "Don't." Sarah's voice was ice. "Don't you dare apologize now. Not after 3 years of this. Not after putting me in the hospital. Not after making me believe I killed Emma." "You did kill her. Your stress." "No." Sarah's scream cut through the shop. "I was 19 years old and terrified, and you blamed me because you couldn't handle your own grief. Emma died because she was born too early, and that's tragedy, not murder. And you used her death to control me, to hurt me, to make me believe I deserved your fists." Sirens approached. Close now, seconds away. Jake tried to stand, failed. His knee was destroyed. "Sarah, please. We can fix this. We can't fix anything." Sarah's face was wet with tears, but her voice was steady. "Because you never wanted to fix it. You wanted someone to hurt. And I'm done being that person." Police burst through the door. 4 officers, weapons drawn. "Police, nobody move." They saw the scene, Jake on the ground injured. David against the workbench, shoulder hanging at a wrong angle. Sarah and Ryan by the light switch, both visibly shaking. The lead officer, a woman in her 40s, took in the broken window. The tire iron, Jake's aggressive posture, even injured. "Who called this in?" "I did." David managed. "He broke in, threatened his ex-wife and son, attacked me when I tried to stop him." The officer looked at Jake. "Sir, are you Jake Miller?" "Yeah, what of it?" "You've been served with an emergency restraining order as of 4 p.m. today. You're ordered to stay 500 feet from Sarah Miller and Ryan Miller. This address is their current residence. You violated that order." She nodded to her partners. "Cuff him." Jake struggled as they restrained him. "She's my wife. That's my son. You can't." "She's your ex-wife who has a protection order," the officer corrected. "And you're under arrest for violation of a restraining order, breaking and entering assault, and Maud." She looked at the tire iron assault with a deadly weapon. "You have the right to remain silent." They hauled Jake out, still protesting. David slid down the workbench to sit on the concrete floor, adrenaline fading and leaving only pain. His shoulder was definitely dislocated. Maybe broken. Sarah crossed to him, knelt down. "Oh God, David. Your shoulder? I'll live. Are you okay? Is Ryan okay?" "We're fine. Her voice cracked. "You fought him. You actually fought Jake. And you're not military. You're not trained, and you still had to," David said simply. "Couldn't let him hurt you." The female officer came back. "Ambulance is coming for your shoulder, and we'll need statements from all of you." She looked at Sarah. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Kate Rodriguez. I work with domestic violence cases. That man will be held without bail until his arraignment, minimum 72 hours. That gives you time to secure better protection, get a lawyer, figure out next steps." "Thank you," Sarah whispered. Officer Rodriguez looked at David. "You're lucky. Jake Miller has a record. 2 prior domestic violence charges from previous relationships. Both times the women dropped charges. This time we've got independent witnesses, clear evidence, and a violation of a restraining order. He's not getting out easy." Ryan finally spoke, small voice. "Is Mr. David going to be okay?" Rodriguez smiled gently. "He's going to be fine. He's a hero." "I told you," Ryan said to his mother. "I told you Mr. David would help." The hospital trip took 4 hours. Dislocated shoulder, no break, but ligament damage that would require weeks of recovery. They put David's arm in a sling, gave him pain medication, sent him home with instructions to rest. Mrs. Henderson had stayed at the shop while they were gone, making sure it was secure. She'd called Patricia, who was already working on the criminal case. She'd called Carol from the diner, who'd sent over food. She'd called 3 other neighbors who'd offered various forms of help. The community was rallying. "This is what we do," Mrs. Henderson said as she prepared soup in David's kitchen. When one of us is in trouble, the rest of us circle the wagons. That's how neighborhoods survive. David sat at the table arm, throbbing despite medication. Sarah and Ryan were asleep in the back room, exhausted. He should be sleeping too, but adrenaline aftershocks kept him wired. He'll make bail eventually, David said. Jake, he's got connections, money. This isn't over. Maybe not, but he made a mistake tonight. He showed his true colors with independent witnesses and police documentation. Every time he acts out, the case against him gets stronger. Mrs. Henderson set a bowl of soup in front of David. Patricia tells me the restraining order will be extended. And with his violation tonight, the judge is likely to grant Sarah emergency sole custody of Ryan. That's what we're building toward, full legal custody and a divorce that strips Jake of parental rights. That could take months. Yes, which means Sarah and Ryan need stable housing for months. They need continuity for Ryan's schooling. They need safety while the legal process unfolds. Mrs. Henderson met his eyes. Can you provide that? David thought about his small shop, his smaller apartment, his limited resources. Then he thought about Ryan's laughter when learning about spark plugs, about Sarah's first real smile, about the way his chest didn't feel quite so empty when they were around. Yes, I can provide that. Good, because I think you need them as much as they need you. Mrs. Henderson patted his good shoulder. Linda would be proud of you, David. You've honored Ethan's memory by protecting another child. That matters. After Mrs. Henderson left, David sat in darkness thinking about tomorrow, about the legal battles ahead, about Jake's inevitable release and future threats, about the impossibility of protecting people with only good intentions and working-class resources, but also about community, about Mrs. Henderson and Carol and Patricia and Officer Rodriguez, about all the people who'd shown up when called, about the small network of support that made impossible things slightly less impossible. His phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. Thank you for everything. You saved our lives tonight. David typed back, you saved your own life. I just bought you time. Then her response came quickly. Sometimes that's all anyone needs. Time to heal. Time to be strong. Thank you for giving us that. David looked at the empty apartment, at pictures of Ethan and Linda, at 3 years of isolation and grief. Then he thought about the back room where Sarah and Ryan slept, about the sound of Ryan's voice asking questions, about Sarah's determination to survive. Maybe healing didn't mean forgetting. Maybe it meant making space for new people without erasing old ones. Maybe it meant the second plate of food finally being eaten by someone who needed it, and that being enough. Outside, the dark Silverado was gone. Jake was in custody. The immediate threat had passed. But David knew this was just the beginning. The real battle, court dates, custody hearings, the slow grind of legal justice was still ahead. And for the first time in 3 years, David felt ready to fight. Not because he was strong, not because he was capable, but because some fights mattered more than the odds of winning. Some people were worth protecting even when protection seemed impossible. Some promises once made became the foundation for building something new from the ruins of what was lost. He finished his soup, took his pain medication, went to sleep thinking about tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. Thinking about family, not the one he'd lost, but the one he was building from the broken pieces he and Sarah had brought together. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real, and real was enough. Part 3, The Long Road Home. 6,000 words. Ket Thu Quan Chin. 3 weeks after Jake's arrest, David stood in the Multnomah County Courthouse wearing a suit he'd borrowed from a customer. The tie felt like a noose. He'd spent 42 years avoiding places like this: sterile hallways, fluorescent lights, the institutional smell of floor wax and nervous sweat. Places where lives got decided by people in robes who didn't know you didn't care about your story beyond what fit on legal documents. Sarah sat beside him on a wooden bench outside courtroom 4B, hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. She wore a dress Mrs. Henderson had found at Goodwill. Modest, professional, the kind of outfit designed to make judges see good mother instead of domestic violence victim. Ryan sat between them, legs swinging, not quite reaching the floor. He wore his only good shirt, the blue one with a small stain David had tried unsuccessfully to remove. Patricia Nguyen paced nearby, phone pressed to her ear, having rapid-fire conversations with people whose titles David didn't fully understand. assistant district attorney, victim's advocate, child protective services liaison. A small army of professionals who'd mobilized because Sarah had finally found the courage to stop running. "They're offering a deal," Patricia said, snapping her phone shut. She sat across from them, expression carefully neutral. "Jake pleads guilty to assault, violation of restraining order, and criminal trespass. In exchange, they dropped the assault with a deadly weapon charge. He'd get 18 months eligible for parole in 9. Sarah's breath hitched. "That's all 9 months. It's more than most domestic violence cases get. Most end in probation anger management classes. Jake has priors, but both victims dropped charges, so it's harder to prove pattern." Patricia's voice was gentle but honest. "This guarantees jail time. Guarantees him on the registry. Guarantees Sarah gets full custody without dragging Ryan through testimony." David felt rage building in his chest. Jake had put Sarah in the hospital, had terrorized a 6-year-old child, had broken into David's shop and nearly killed him. And the system wanted to offer him 9 months. "What if we go to trial?" David asked. Patricia hesitated. "Then it's a gamble. We could win and get him 5 years. Or the jury could sympathize with veteran with PTSD, see Sarah as the wife who abandoned him and give him probation. Domestic violence trials are unpredictable. Juries don't like messy situations where both people have trauma." "I don't have trauma," Sarah said quietly. "I have injuries. There's a difference." "I know, but Jake's lawyer will argue otherwise. They'll bring up Emma imply you were unstable after losing a child, suggest Jake was trying to hold the family together while you spiraled." Patricia's expression was grim. "I've seen them do it 100 times. Turn the victim into the villain." Sarah looked at Ryan, who was trying very hard to be brave. "What do you think I should do, baby?" Ryan's voice was small, but clear. "I don't want to talk in front of the judge. I don't want to see him." Sarah closed her eyes. David saw the weight of impossible choices crushing her. 18 months wasn't justice, but forcing Ryan to testify to relive his trauma in front of strangers, while Jake stared at him from across a courtroom, wasn't mercy either. "We take the deal," Sarah said finally, "not because it's fair, because it's what Ryan needs." The hearing took 20 minutes. Jake appeared in orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, face carefully blank. He didn't look at Sarah or Ryan, didn't acknowledge David's existence, just stood while his lawyer read the plea agreement in legal language designed to minimize horror. Simple assault instead of beat his wife until she lost consciousness. Criminal trespass instead of broke into a building to terrorize his family. The judge, a tired woman in her 60s who'd probably heard 1,000 versions of this story, asked Jake if he understood the terms. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you agree to plead guilty to all charges as stated?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you understand that you're waiving your right to trial?" "Yes, Your Honor." The judge looked at Sarah. "Mr. Millen, do you understand that accepting this plea means the defendant will serve a maximum of 18 months with possibility of parole after 9 months?" Sarah's voice barely rose above a whisper. "I understand." "And you're comfortable with this resolution?" "Comfortable. As if any of this could ever be comfortable." Sarah straightened her shoulders. "I want my son safe. I want to move forward with our lives. If this accomplishes that, then yes, I accept it." The judge nodded, made some notes, then looked at Jake with an expression that suggested she'd seen too many men like him and run out of hope they'd change. "Mr. Miller, I'm sentencing you to 18 months in the Oregon Department of Corrections. You'll be eligible for parole in 9 months contingent on completing anger management and substance abuse programs. Upon release, you'll remain on probation for 3 years. The restraining order protecting Ms. Miller and Ryan Miller remains in effect for 10 years. Any violation will result in immediate incarceration. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Then we're adjourned." Gavel. Sound like a door slamming. Jake was led away. He didn't look back. Sarah started crying the moment they reached the hallway. Not dramatic sobbing, just silent tears that wouldn't stop. Mrs. Henderson appeared from somewhere. She'd been waiting in the public gallery and wrapped Sarah in a hug. "It's over," Mrs. Henderson murmured. "The worst part is over." But it wasn't over. David knew that. 18 months wasn't forever. 9 months was nothing. Eventually, Jake would be released angry and blaming everyone except himself. And then what Ryan tugged on David's sleeve. Mr. David, does this mean he can't come back? David knelt down, meeting the boy's eyes. Not for a long time. And when he does get out, he's not allowed near you or your mom. If he tries, he goes right back to jail. Promise? David thought about all the promises that got broken, about systems that failed, about the uncomfortable truth that protection orders were just paper and law enforcement was reactive, not proactive. But he looked at Ryan's face, a 6-year-old who needed to believe adults could keep him safe, and made the promise anyway. I promise, and I'll be there to make sure. The custody hearing came 2 weeks later. Sarah filed for divorce in full legal custody. Jake from jail contested it, not because he wanted Ryan Patricia suspected, but because giving up felt like losing, and men like Jake couldn't tolerate loss. His lawyer argued that Jake was a decorated veteran with PTSD who'd made mistakes under stress, that he loved his son, that children needed fathers, that with treatment, Jake could be rehabilitated. Patricia countered with medical records, police reports, testimony from Officer Rodriguez about the break-in, photographs of Sarah's scars, Mrs. Henderson's statement about witnessing Emma's death, and Jake's subsequent psychological abuse of Sarah. And then Patricia did something David hadn't expected. She called David as a character witness. Mr. Chen, how long have you known Sarah and Ryan Miller? About 6 weeks. And in that time, what have you observed about their relationship? David thought about Ryan asking endless questions about motorcycles, about Sarah reading to him every night despite being exhausted from double shifts, about the way Ryan instinctively moved to protect his mother when he thought danger was near. Sarah is a good mother. She's patient. She listens. She works 2 jobs to keep Ryan fed and clothed. She helps him with homework every night. She makes sure he brushes his teeth and says his prayer and feels safe. David's voice caught. And Ryan loves her. You can see it. The way he looks at her like she's his whole world. That kind of bond, it's not something you fake. Have you observed any concerning behavior from Sarah? No, she's never raised her voice to Ryan, never been careless with his safety. She's scared a lot. Scared of Jake, scared of being homeless, scared of failing Ryan, but she never lets that fear make her a worse parent. If anything, it makes her more careful. Patricia nodded. One more question. Why did you offer them shelter when you barely knew them? David looked at Sarah, at Ryan, at the life they had accidentally built together. Because I lost my son 3 years ago. Car accident. And after that, my wife left because the grief was too much. I spent 3 years alone going through the motions, pretending that was living. He swallowed hard. Then I met Sarah and Ryan, and for the first time since Ethan died, I felt like maybe there was still good in the world worth protecting. So I protected it. Jake's lawyer tried to twist it, suggested David had ulterior motives, implied inappropriate relationships. Patricia shut it down with medical records proving Sarah's injuries predated meeting David, with statements from neighbors confirming David's character, with Ryan's own words in a sealed interview with a child psychologist. The judge took 1 week to decide. When the ruling came, it was decisive. Sarah received full legal and physical custody. Jake retained no visitation rights pending completion of treatment programs. The divorce was granted. Sarah was free. Sarah cried when Patricia called with the news. But this time they were different tears. Relief, exhaustion, the kind of crying people did when a weight they'd carried so long finally lifted. Life found new rhythms. Sarah worked mornings at the Silver Spoon and evenings at a grocery store Carol had connected her to. 12-hour days, but honest work with managers who knew her story and gave her grace when she needed it. Ryan started first grade at Rosa Parks Elementary, half a mile from Chen's Motors. David walked him there every morning before opening the shop. Ryan's teacher, Miss Kimura, was patient with his anxiety, with the way he sometimes flinched at loud noises or cried for no apparent reason anyone could see. Trauma had its own timeline. Mrs. Henderson became a fixture in their lives. She watched Ryan after school until Sarah finished work. She taught him to bake cookies. She told him stories about his mother as a baby, about his grandmother Mary, about the strength that ran in his family, like a river underground, always there even when you couldn't see it. David rebuilt the shop's back room properly, installed a real bed, a small desk for Ryan's homework, a bookshelf. Mrs. Henderson filled with children's books from library sales, painted the walls blue, Ryan's choice. put up curtains that blocked out the streetlight, made it a room instead of a storage space. He didn't charge rent. Sarah tried to pay anyway, leaving 20s hidden in strange places inside the coffee canister, tucked into the toolbox, slipped between couch cushions. David kept finding them and putting them in a jar labeled Ryan's college fund. Sarah cried when she discovered it. "You're giving me everything, and I'm giving you nothing," she said one night when Ryan was asleep and they were cleaning up after a shared dinner. "You're giving me purpose," David replied. "That's not nothing. It's not enough. It's everything I need." The months passed. Jake served his time in silence. No attempts to contact Sarah or Ryan. No letters begging forgiveness. Just absence, which was its own kind of gift. David's shoulder healed slowly. Physical therapy twice a week. He couldn't lift heavy engines like before, had to hire a part-time assistant, a kid named Marcus from the neighborhood who needed work and didn't mind the irregular hours. The shop actually made more money with two people running it. Turned out David had been bottlenecking his own business by insisting on doing everything alone. Sarah and David circled each other carefully. There was attraction impossible to miss, but neither acted on it. Too complicated. Too risky. What if it didn't work and everything fell apart? What if Ryan got hurt? What if they lost the strange functional family they'd built by trying to force it into a conventional shape? So they existed in comfortable limbo. Sarah in the back room, David upstairs, sharing meals, sharing conversation, sharing Ryan's victories and setbacks. Finding intimacy in mundane moments, grocery shopping together, arguing about whether to buy name brand or generic cereal, laughing when Ryan tried to help fix a motorcycle and accidentally knocked over a can of oil. Small moments, ordinary moments, the kind that built lives when you weren't looking. On a Friday night in December, 6 months after Jake's arrest, David went to the Silver Spoon alone. First time in 6 months he'd ordered the second plate of food. Carol raised an eyebrow when he sat in booth 7. "Where's your family?" "Sarah's working late shift. Ryan's with Mrs. Henderson." David ordered 2 plates of meatloaf out of habit, then paused. "Actually make it 3 plates. I'm taking them home." Carol smiled, finally moving on. "Maybe, or just moving forward. Not sure there's a difference." She brought the food in takeout containers. David paid, left his usual generous tip, drove back to the shop where Ryan was waiting with homework questions and excitement about a science project. They ate together, David, Ryan, and Mrs. Henderson, while Sarah's chair stayed empty, saving her food for when she got home at 9. Different from the old ritual. Better. After dinner, while Mrs. Henderson helped Ryan with math, David's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Chen, this is Detective Sarah Morrison, Portland Police Bureau. I'm calling about Jake Miller." David's stomach dropped. "What about him?" "He was released on parole this morning. As part of his conditions, we wanted to notify you that he's required to attend check-ins with his parole officer weekly, maintain employment, and stay within Clackamas County. He's prohibited from entering Multnomah County, where you and Ms. Miller reside." "Why are you telling me this?" Morrison's voice was careful. "Because in my experience, men like Miller don't stop being threats just because they've served time. I wanted you to know he's out to be vigilant and to report any violations immediately. The restraining order is still active. Any attempt to contact Sarah or Ryan, even indirect contact, is grounds for immediate arrest." David thanked her, ended the call, and sat staring at his phone. Jake was out, 9 months exactly as predicted. Somewhere in Clackamas County, 20 miles away. Too close. Always too close. He thought about telling Sarah immediately. Rejected it. She'd been sleeping through the night for the first time in years. Ryan had stopped asking if he was coming back. They'd built fragile peace. Why shatter it? But secrets had weight. And David had learned that protecting people sometimes meant trusting them with hard truths. When Sarah came home at 9:15, exhausted and smelling like French fries, David was waiting. "We need to talk." Her face went pale. "What happened?" "Jake got released this morning, parole. He's required to stay in Clackamas County, can't come near you, still has the restraining order. But he's out." Sarah sat down slowly. David watched fear and exhaustion and something like resignation cross her face. "I knew this was coming. 9 months. They told us 9 months. I thought you should know. In case," David didn't finish the sentence, "in case he violates it. In case he shows up anyway." Sarah's voice was flat. "Men like Jake don't change. Parole doesn't fix what's broken in them. We're prepared. The shop has better locks, security cameras, contacts with police. We're not where we were 6 months ago. No, we're not. Sarah looked at David, really looked. 6 months ago, I was homeless. Now I have a job, 2 jobs, a place to live, people who care about us. Ryan's thriving. Her voice caught. I'm happy, David. For the first time since Emma died, I'm actually happy. And Jake being released doesn't change that. David felt something shift, a decision crystallizing. Sarah, I need to ask you something. Okay. This arrangement, you living here, us raising Ryan together, it works. Better than works. But we're doing it without naming what it is. David's hands were sweating. He hadn't been this nervous since asking Linda to marry him 30 years ago. What if we named it? What if we stop pretending this is temporary? Sarah stared at him. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you, not just care about you, not just want to protect you. Love you the way I loved Linda. Different, but just as real. David's voice shook. I'm saying Ryan feels like my son. I'm saying this us feels like family. And I want it to be family. Officially, legally, whatever way you're comfortable with. David, you don't have to answer now. I just need you to know that I'm not helping you temporarily until you get back on your feet. I'm building a life with you. If you want that too. Sarah was crying. I want that. God, I want that so much. But what if Jake doesn't get to decide our future? He took enough. He doesn't get this too. David reached across the table, took her hands. I know the timing's terrible. I know you're still healing. I'm not asking for anything to change right now. Just asking if someday when you're ready, we could try. Try being more than roommates sharing space. Try being partners building something. Sarah squeezed his hands. I'm scared. Me too. I have so much baggage. Trauma, debt, a son who wakes up screaming from nightmares, trust issues that might never fully heal. I have a dead son I'll never stop grieving, an ex-wife who left me, 3 years of isolation I'm still learning to overcome. David smiled slightly. We're both disasters. Might as well be disasters together. Sarah laughed through tears. That's the worst romantic pitch I've ever heard. It's honest. It is. She stood, walked around the table, kissed him. Soft, tentative. The kiss of two broken people discovering they fit together in their brokenness. Okay. Yes, someday, when we're ready, let's try. Ryan's voice came from the doorway. Does this mean Mr. David's staying forever? They jumped apart like teenagers caught by parents. Ryan stood in his pajamas. Captain the Bear tucked under his arm, looking sleepy and hopeful. Sarah recovered first. How long have you been standing there? Long enough, Ryan crossed to them. I think it's good. Mr. David's staying forever. He's good at fixing things. I'm not sure I can fix everything, David said carefully. That's okay, Mom says nobody can fix everything. But you fix a lot. Ryan yawned. Can I go back to bed now? Yeah, baby, go ahead. They watched him shuffle back to his room. When the door closed, Sarah and David looked at each other and started laughing. Quiet, slightly hysterical laughter, born from tension and relief and the absurdity of having a 6-year-old approve their relationship. Well, David said, that went well. Better than I imagined. Sarah leaned against him. We're really doing this. We're really trying. No promises about outcomes, just promises about effort. I can live with that. They stood together in the kitchen, not David's kitchen or Sarah's temporary space, but their kitchen, listening to Ryan's soft snoring through the wall, building a future from the ruins of the past. Imperfect, complicated, real. 2 weeks before Christmas, the dark Silverado appeared again. David was closing the shop when he saw it. Same truck, same driver. Jake sitting in the parking lot across the street, making no effort to hide. David's first instinct was to call police. His second was to confront. He did neither. Just walked calmly inside, locked the door, called Detective Morrison. He's outside my shop, just sitting there, not approaching, but he's violating the county restriction. We'll send a unit. Stay inside, don't engage. David gathered Sarah and Ryan into the back room, explained calmly. Sarah's face went white, but she held it together. They'd practice this emergency protocol, stay together, stay calm, let authorities handle it. Through the window, David watched police arrive. Watch them approach the Silverado. Watch Jake get handcuffed again, loaded into the back of a cruiser. Officer Rodriguez came inside afterward. He violated parole conditions by entering Multnomah County. That's automatic revocation. He goes back to finish his full sentence, no parole this time. How long am? 9 more months minimum. Likely more because of the violation. Rodriguez looked at Sarah. This is good for you. Shows he can't follow conditions. Strengthens your case if he ever tries to modify custody arrangements. After Rodriguez left, Sarah broke down. Not from fear, from relief. It's really over this time, isn't it? For now, David said, because promising forever was dishonest and Sarah deserved honesty. For now, you're safe, and we'll deal with later when later comes. Christmas came quietly. No extravagance, money was still tight, but Mrs. Henderson organized a neighborhood potluck. Carol brought a turkey. Patricia came with gifts for Ryan. Officer Rodriguez dropped by off-duty with cookies her daughter had made. The community that had rallied in crisis now celebrated in peace. Ryan got books and toy cars and a model motorcycle kit he'd been wanting. Sarah gave David a framed photo she'd secretly commissioned David, Sarah, and Ryan standing in front of Chen's Motors, all three smiling. Family portrait without needing to say the word. David gave Sarah something small. A key. What's this? Shop key, so you don't have to knock. This is your home. Officially. He paused. And when you're ready, if you're ready, there's an apartment upstairs. Bigger than the back room. Room for all three of us. Sarah held the key like it was precious. Maybe it was. Not because of what it opened, but what it represented. Permission to stay. Permission to belong. Permission to stop running and start living. I'm ready, she said. Whenever you are. That night, they moved Sarah and Ryan upstairs. Not much to move, they'd arrived with nothing and accumulated only necessities. But each box carried up the stairs felt significant, claiming space, building permanence. Ryan got his own room, small but his. David and Sarah took the master separate beds at first because rushing felt wrong, but in the same space. Learning to sleep in proximity, learning trust in its most vulnerable form. 6 more months passed. Jake served his time, was released again, this time with stricter conditions, mandatory GPS monitoring, weekly therapy, substance abuse treatment. He moved to Eugene, 2 hours away, sent Ryan a birthday card that Sarah intercepted. Patricia advised letting it sit unopened in a file evidence, if needed, but not something Ryan needed to see. Ryan thrived in first grade, made friends, brought home art projects that David hung on the fridge, stopped having nightmares, started calling David Dad in casual moments he probably didn't realize were monumental. Sarah got promoted to assistant manager at the Silver Spoon, cut her hours at the grocery store, had time to breathe for the first time in years, started therapy with a counselor who specialized in domestic violence survivors, began unpacking trauma she'd carried since losing Emma. David proposed in July. Nothing fancy, just the two of them on the shop floor after closing, surrounded by motorcycles and tools and the life they'd built. I know we're already family, but I'd like to make it official, if you want. Sarah said yes. They married in September in Mrs. Henderson's backyard. Carol officiated, got ordained online specifically for this. Patricia and Officer Rodriguez attended. Ryan was ring bearer. Marcus served as best man despite having only worked at the shop 8 months. Small wedding, cheap wedding, perfect wedding. They honeymooned by closing the shop for 3 days and driving to the coast. Ryan built sandcastles. Sarah and David walked the beach at dawn holding hands, not talking, just being. On the drive home, Ryan asked, "Does this mean we're a real family now?" David and Sarah exchanged glances. "We've always been a real family," Sarah said. "Marriage just makes the paperwork official." "Good, because I like this family." "Me too, buddy," David said. "Me too." Till now. 1 year after the wedding, David stood in the Silver Spoon on a Friday night. Booth 7, 3 plates of meatloaf in front of him. Sarah beside him, Ryan across the table telling elaborate stories about second-grade drama. Ethan's blue backpack still hung on the coat hook. David never moved it, but now Ryan's red backpack hung beside it. 2 children, one lost, one found. Both loved. Carol refilled their water. "How's married life treating you?" "Pretty good," David said. "No complaints." "Liar, I heard Ryan say you snore." "That's slander. I breathe loudly, it's different." They laughed. Normal family banter, the kind David thought he'd lost forever. After dinner, walking back to the truck, Ryan grabbed David's hand. Did it without thinking, casual gesture of trust. David's chest tightened. These moments, small, ordinary, profound, made everything worthwhile. "Dad," Ryan said, first time using it deliberately, not by accident. "Yeah, thank you for keeping us safe." David squeezed his hand. "Thank you for letting me." They drove home through Portland streets, East Side still struggling, still poor, still the kind of neighborhood where dreams came reluctantly, but also the place where neighbors looked out for each other, where Mrs. Henderson baked cookies for kids who needed them, where Carol gave jobs to people others wouldn't hire, where communities built families from broken pieces. At Chen's Motors, David parked in his usual spot. The sign still said, "Motorcycle Repair," in letters that needed replacing. The building still looked tired, but the lights were on, and inside were people waiting for him, people who'd chosen him and let themselves be chosen. Sarah put Ryan to bed while David cleaned up dinner dishes. They met in the living room afterward, collapsed on the couch, exhausted from good things instead of hard things. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, "dangerous activity." She elbowed him gently. "About Emma. About how for so long her death was just pain. Just this wound that never healed. And now I think maybe she brought me to you. Not in a religious way, but..." Sarah struggled for words. "If she hadn't died, I wouldn't have met Jake. Wouldn't have gotten trapped in that marriage. Wouldn't have run. Wouldn't have ended up at the Silver Spoon in that night when you were ordering food for ghosts." David understood. "You think tragedy had purpose. Maybe not purpose, but consequences that led somewhere good. Emma's death broke me, but being broken made me run. And running brought me here. To you. To this." She gestured at their home, small, imperfect theirs. "I don't know if I believe in fate, but I believe in this, in us, in what we built from all that pain." David pulled her close. "Emma mattered. Ethan mattered. We don't heal by forgetting them. No, we heal by honoring them, by living lives they'd be proud of." Sarah kissed him. "I think they'd be proud of this." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, Portland continued messy, complicated, occasionally cruel. But inside Chen's Motors, in the small apartment above a struggling business, a family existed, cobbled together from loss and fear and the simple human need to protect and be protected. Not perfect, never perfect, but real. And some days real was the only miracle that mattered. Years later, David would look back and identify this moment as the one where he stopped surviving and started living again, where grief transformed from prison into memory, where the second plate of food finally got eaten by someone who needed it, where promises made to ghosts became promises kept to the living. And that was enough. It was always enough.